Let's talk today about naturalization to becoming an American citizen. It's a good part of the 14th Amendment. We're spending a lot of time on the 14th Amendment. The first part of Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. Okay, let's make sure we understand this because a lot of people don't. We talked about birthright citizenship. That's simple. Okay, if you're within the jurisdiction of the United States, meaning that you don't reside or are part of a foreign embassy, and you are inside of the United States borders, and you are born inside of the United States borders, you're a citizen of the United States. That's simple, right? So birthright citizenship is pretty self-explanatory. Naturalization, on the other hand, gets a little more complicated. And it's still such a huge, huge part of the United States of America because we are such a land of immigrants, you know? How many of us trace our beginnings back to some form of naturalization, whether it be through Ellis Island, which was, boom, naturalization like that, oftentimes in a day, or maybe through some other instance. Maybe your parents or your grandparents were married to an American citizen, or maybe they came over as refugees in World War II, or who knows? There's just a lot of different ways, different routes to be naturalized. And so what we're going to do in this video is we're going to talk about naturalization. And we're going to do it on a number of levels and a number of steps. First, I'm going to talk to you generally about a green card, what it is, its significance, and the concept of naturalization. Then we're going to visit with Mrs. Byton, who is married to a UK citizen. And we're going to talk about the experience that her and her husband went through for him to become a naturalized US citizen. Then what I want to do is I want to talk about refugees and how refugees become naturalized through the process of asylum, because that's a big portion of the United States as well, the history of the United States and in the future of the United States. And then finally, I want to look at a special group of immigrants to the United States, DACA, Deferred Action Childhood Arrival, a group of young, they're not youngsters now, but came to the United States as children with illegal parents. They had no say in the matter, and yet they live, and yet they have grown up in and live in the shadows, so to speak. And the United States government has been trying to find somehow to rectify the situation for these some 800,000 individuals for some time. But with an immigration system that is often politicized, it's been difficult to deal with this. Immigration is a huge topic, and it's a big part of citizenship, and the naturalization process needs to be understood. So roll up your sleeves, baby. We're going to look at the process of naturalization.
Rita asked me on Instagram, what's the difference between naturalization and citizenship? I'm Andrew Henderson. This is 1 Minute Nomad. To have citizenship is to be a citizen of a country. It's what allows you to get a passport. It's what allows you the unfettered right to live and work and study in that country. Naturalization is an entirely different animal. In fact, naturalization is often the process by which you obtain citizenship. So naturalization is the process of being naturalized as a citizen of the country. There's not a difference between the two things. One is a path to another. So while many people obtain citizenship at birth, i.e. I obtained U.S. citizenship by virtue of being born there, someone else could move from their country to the United States, spend the amount of years it takes to become naturalized, at which point they'll be a U.S. citizen, and at which point they have all the rights of a natural-born U.S. citizen. Naturalization is simply another way to obtain citizenship.
Should you become an American citizen or just hold on to your green card? Citizenship will get you an American passport, you'd be able to vote, you could potentially sponsor your parents. Sounds great, right? Hold up. Before you apply for citizenship, there are a few very important things to consider, so do not apply for citizenship until you watch this video. A green card, also known as permanent residency, allows someone to live and work in the U.S. permanently, but you keep your home country's citizenship and passport. In order to become a U.S. citizen, you first need to have a green card for at least 3 or 5 years. 3 years if you got your green card through a U.S. citizen spouse, and 5 years if you got a green card in any other way, such as employment. So you cannot jump to citizenship without having a green card first. Make sense? So why would someone give up their green card and pay $725 to become a U.S. citizen when they can already live and work here permanently? What does U.S. citizenship get you? Well, for starters, you have to renew your green card every 10 years, which costs $540. Once you become a U.S. citizen, you are done with the USCIS. No more paperwork ever. Second, you can lose your green card and be placed into removal proceedings if you commit certain crimes. This is a tricky area. Some crimes are treated differently under immigration law than criminal law, and what might seem like a minor brush up with the law can have serious immigration consequences. U.S. citizens cannot be removed unless they committed fraud to get their green card or citizenship, such as not disclosing deportation orders to the immigration officer or lying about their identity, in which case you can get denaturalized. This is very rare and not something most people have to worry about. Another huge benefit of U.S. citizenship is the U.S. passport. It is one of the most powerful passports in the world and allows visa-free travel to many, many countries. If you're from a country like Canada or Singapore, that's not all that attractive as those passports are pretty powerful. But for most of the world, the U.S. passport is something to be coveted. Next, the right to vote. U.S. citizenship allows you to vote and even run for office. But sorry, folks, you can't run for president. For that, you have to be born in the U.S. U.S. citizens can live abroad for as long as they want without worrying about abandoning their green card. With a green card, you have to spend at least 6 months out of every year in the U.S. to maintain your status. There are ways to leave the country for several years with a green card. However, you have to fill out paperwork and meet certain requirements to do so. One of the biggest advantages of U.S. citizenship is the ability to sponsor family members. As a U.S. citizen, you can sponsor your spouse, your parents, and your unmarried children under the age of 21 as immediate relatives. Immediate relative means that there is no wait for a visa number and that an immigrant visa is always available for these categories should you choose to apply.
Hello, Miss Byte.
Hello.
We're here today to talk to you about your experience, your naturalization experience of your husband in regards to becoming a citizen of the United States. And I thought that you could shed some light on your experience with my students.
Yep.
And so can you tell us your situation and how it went?
So I met my husband in 2014 and we decided we wanted to get married, and we started with an immigration lawyer. There's two options: K1 visa, K2 visa.
Okay, slow down. What are those?
Yep.
Oh, you can explain.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
K1 visa is a fiance visa.
Okay.
So you're asking, can this person come to the country and can we be married and move the process from there? K2 is, I want to bring my spouse from a different country to the United States. So we met with an immigration lawyer, and she told us point blank that the government would prefer you ask for permission. So please, government, can we get married? If you allow it, we'll do everything you want, and that's the K1, the fiance visa.
We got to take a look at what a visa is. A visa is an official document that allows the bearer to legally enter a foreign country. The visa is usually stamped or glued into the passport. There are a lot of different types of visas. There's a work visa, tourist visa, business visa, student visa, refugee visa, spousal visa, working holiday visa, transit visa, e-visa. non-immigrant versus immigrant visa, all sorts of different visas. How you get a visa, no matter what the visa is you go to the country's website and you look at their requirements for entering the country. You use the web to get your information, to answer your questions, to see if there's any fees to pay. Every visa has an expiration date. You either staple it or glue it into your passport and keep it with you all the time. That is what a visa is. Now, we'll continue with Miss Byton.
Please, government, can we get married? If you allow it, we'll do everything you want, and that's the K1, the fiance visa. So that's the route we took. Started that in February of 2015, and that process took a really long time. Had to provide so much personal information, and it was never enough for them. I had packets of our transcripts, our photos together, anything proving that we were a legitimate couple, and nothing ever seemed to be enough. So some of it was you provide it digitally, other times it was in-person meetings where I physically had to present them with information.
Okay, so he was living here with you at the time.
Sort of. So he would come over as long as his visa would allow, which was 3 months at a time. So he would come here, do interviews with me as needed, and then he would go back and sort of renew his visa by going home and then returning here.
And he was from a friendly country. I mean, the U.S.
Yes.
is going to allow the U.K. to do things that it won't allow if your fiance was Nigerian.
Absolutely. My husband is from England. I'm from a whole family who's done this process before. My mom's from the Middle East. I can tell you now that process would not have looked the same to her doing it in this century than in the 90s when she did it.
And especially under the Trump administration.
Absolutely.
Because they closed the door to Muslims.
Yep, exactly.
Palestinians. She wasn't Muslim, but she was Palestinian.
She was Christian, but that's still, they look at where you're from
Yeah,
first and
Arab.
foremost. Yep.
Okay, so this is all a subset of naturalization.
Yes.
So he was
Yes.
being naturalized.
Yes.
And how long did the process take him?
So we roll through the K1 visa, we get married, we process everything, and then from there, it's like a clock begins. And for most people, it's 5 years. So 5 years from the time you're allowed in the States that they're watching you, and they want you to provide all of this information.
For marriage?
No, we were already married, but towards naturalization. Towards
Oh,
becoming
okay, so it's a
citizen.
5-year process with the green card and such.
Yep.
Was he on a green card?
He was on a green card that took a really long time, though.
Okay.
So he was probably living here for a year after we married, but couldn't legally work, which was very frustrating. You can't open a bank account, you can't do all of these things. So the way my husband describes his first year of marriage to me living in the United States is he said, America kept me at arm's length.
Okay.
So he wasn't allowed to do a lot of things, and it was just burden after burden. Thankfully for us, the one nice thing is because we pursued the fiance visa, he could apply for citizenship in 3 years instead of 5.
Okay.
So going back to the idea that, my husband Matt is from England and it made things easier, I know people who had it much more difficult. So a friend of mine, she married a man from Thailand. They did the K2 visa. They were denied for many years. She ended up having to move to him. They even had a child together, and still the United States government kept denying. And mind you, this is a really normal guy with no criminal history, no red flags, just your average easygoing guy, and he was just denied purely from where he was from.
And they're still in that situation?
It took 5 years, but then they finally made it over to the United States. He's not a citizen yet. I imagine that is going to be a tricky process as well. So we began applying for that the second we hit year 3, and that was pretty invasive as well. Again, still proving that we were a real couple.
So was it uncomfortable? Was it invasive? Where was the person that you were sitting down with a little too, I don't know, did they want to know too much?
Yes. So what should have been one of his early naturalization meetings, I drove him because it was to Detroit and I wanted to support him. And the woman who was going to be interviewing him saw me in the waiting room. And she says, "Oh, you come in too." Okay. And she flat out explained that she wanted to observe the way we interacted to make sure we were a real couple. So even though it was him becoming a citizen and that process, it still boiled down to, was he here under real pretenses or were we just faking it?
Was there ever a time where you thought we fucked up? I mean, we have, is there a time where you thought that we messed up here and we're in trouble?
Yes, because every single meeting was, you don't have enough information. You don't have him on enough records. So we bought our first house together, but he couldn't put his name on it because he wasn't a citizen and he didn't have a bank and all that stuff. So then that comes back to bite us, that why isn't he on these documents?
But he can't be on those documents.
Exactly. So we were expected to do things that in reality he was not able to do. He was supposed to provide work history and what he's been doing in the United States. Well, you can't, it took a long time to get the green card, and then obviously you don't just wake up with a job. So, there's this period of time that he's in the United States unemployed, and so they want to ask you about that. So they set up a really difficult situation for you to navigate and then blame you for not finding your way around it.
Okay, let's go back on chronology.
Yeah.
Okay, so you met him where?
In England.
Okay,
Yep.
and you said that K1 visa, the fiance visa, when you guys had decided that you were gonna get married, that was what date that you applied for that?
That would have been the February of 2015.
Okay, February 2015, and that process went how long?
Nearly a year.
Okay, and then when did you get married?
So we got married the last day of that year on December 31st, 2015.
So you were still under the K1 visa when you got married?
Yep.
Okay, so then when you got married, you then apply for the citizenship.
We start green card and permanent residency.
Oh, so that's when the green card starts.
Yep, that's
okay,
when,
I gotcha.
Permanent residency was another big piece too, because we were married and we'd done the K1 didn't necessarily mean he could stay beyond our first year of marriage. So we had to apply for him to stay every year thereafter.
But you did, but that was different from the 3-month visas.
Correct, yep.
Okay, so now you can stay for a year.
Yep.
And it's more permanent. It's a more permanent
Yeah,
kind of extension.
Exactly. We got discouraged quickly though, because we realized, it's every year, it's still filling out that same paperwork and really invasive questions.
Give me an example of an invasive question.
So we had to provide chat logs, like our texts, to show that, I was still asking him to pick up milk on the way home, or, things like that. Provide pictures.
Lovey-dovey pictures?
Not lovey-dovey pictures, but it's still like, we had to send vacation photos and like showing that we were doing things together as a couple. We had to prove that we actually lived together, which is a very hard thing to actually prove.
Yeah, it is. If your name isn't on the lease,
Yeah.
that would be hard to prove.
Yeah. So we put his name on whatever little bills we could.
So you started to get better at it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It was definitely a learning curve. So that made it a little bit easier as we went, but this process is very expensive too.
Oh, how so?
K1 visa was over $1,000, so to even ask the government, can we get married? And there's no money back if they say no. So that was a big risk. From there, we also paid our immigration lawyer for...
That's going to be expensive.
Yeah, and we didn't need her for much. We just needed to know K1 or K2. So that was pretty expensive. And then every year when we had to reapply for his permanent residency, that came to $600-$700 that we're paying every year just to keep him in the country.
For like 4 years, 3 years.
For every year.
So 5 years.
So 600 every year until he could become a citizen.
And now he's a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Does he have all of the rights and privileges of any citizen?
Yep.
Now, did he have to give up his UK citizenship?
He does not. So he was in a really lucky position where he gives up England in name, but not in truth. So he's still, he could still access his benefits from over there. He can move back at any time. There's really nothing stopping him. Though in the naturalization process for him to become a citizen, they asked all sorts of questions like, if the US entered some sort of war, would you take up arms and fight for the US? And, questions you're going to say yes to, even though we're definitely pacifists.
Did he have to do any interviews with England on the exit?
Nope. Nope.
So it's all on the entrance.
Exactly.
And so he is still, he's a dual citizen.
He is.
Now, here's the question. Your daughter, will she be a dual citizen?
She will if she applies. So,
Okay.
and it will be a much easier process for her, given that she's a first generation child in the United States. She can trace her lineage back to her dad really quickly and easily. So, she will be able to get dual
Is
citizenship.
she going, or do you expect her to do that?
I think so. Why not? Yeah.
Do you ever see yourself moving to the UK?
Maybe in our older years, but what I do like is the fact that I'm a teacher and he runs his own business, so we like the idea of maybe spending summers over there.
If you knew a kid who was in love with somebody from the UK, guy or girl,
Yeah.
what would you advise?
Yeah, make sure they're in it as much as you are. That's the really tough thing. Obviously, my husband and I, we were in love. We wanted to make it work. There was so, when you feel like the stacks are against you, or the odds are against you, it kind of makes you more in love. But make sure that's a person who is actively going to be involved in this process, because it took a lot on his end and my end between all the interviews and paperwork and making everything happen. It takes two very dedicated partners.
Okay, guys, part 4 now is going to deal with another route to possible U.S. citizenship, and that is through refugee status, applying for and being accepted for asylum to the United States, with a possibility of obtaining U.S. citizenship at the end of the day. I'm going to do this with a series of 3 videos. The first is a run around a refugee camp by an organization called Operation Blessing, and it's a little Iraqi boy who is just a typical Iraqi boy living in a refugee camp in Greece as a result of the Syrian civil war. It's a couple of years old, but refugee camps are refugee camps. The last 2 videos are both from the UN High Commission on Refugees, and will be in a cartoon sort of sense and walk you through the process of what a refugee is, as opposed to the idea of asylum, how the two come together when they bump up against a border like the southern border in the United States. The United States has had so many people through our history apply for and come into these United States as refugees or applying for asylum. That has been a basis of many Americans, many Americans. And a lot of them currently, in other wars and other times, it's been through ports of entry other than at Mexico. Currently, today, there are so many trying to gain asylum status in the southern border at Mexico, particularly through the triangle down in Central America of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, running from gangs, from drug gangs. These past 4 years under the administration of Donald Trump have been some of the hardest years in recent memory for immigrants trying to obtain any kind of legal status in the United States. The Trump administration came in with a goal to curtail immigration into the United States, and severe actions at the border, including the detainees and children detainees, virtually stopped asylum applications at the southern border. And so it will be interesting to see what happens now with Donald Trump out of office and the Biden administration. What will be the ongoing policy in regards to refugees and asylum seekers? it's a problem in the United States. We haven't had immigration reform since the 1980s. And it's part of the process that we have with this inability for Republicans and Democrats to come together for any kind of bipartisanship in Congress. So it will change. How it will change, I don't know. But these 3 videos should give you an indication of how a refugee lives, the specific properties of identifying refugees, and the specific properties of identifying asylum. So take a look and remember that so many Americans were once refugees, and so many Americans have claimed, requested, and received asylum into the United States.
My name is Khamsa Hamza. وصل Iraq. This is my story. I live in either many refugee camps in Greece with my dad. My mom and sisters are still in Iraq. My dad and I are trying to get to Germany, and then we were sent for my mom and my sister. We are here because just want a better life. In my country, ISIS were killing us. They killed many of our friends. My dad is everything to me. He takes care of me, feeds me, and plays with me. But I miss my mom sometimes. When we came from Iraq, we walked very far. We came by bus, taxi, and then a boat, and then a train. We slept anywhere on the way. Now we have been here waiting for 3 months, waiting for the border to open so we can have a better life. Every night I pray that tomorrow we can go, but nothing happens. I will keep praying every night.
Refugees are ordinary people who live through extraordinary times. In the country they live in, conflict or persecution have put them at risk. They have no other choice but to flee and to leave their country to seek safety. This means leaving a lot behind, one of the hardest decisions a person can ever take. So what makes a person a refugee? Refugees are no longer in their own country and have crossed at least one border. Ongoing conflict may put them at risk if they return, or they are at risk of persecution because of their nationality, race, or sexual orientation, or because they associate with a religion, a social group, or a political opinion. Some get jailed, or harmed physically, or mentally. Refugees often flee with no more than the clothes on their back and leave behind their everyday life. They may lose their home, their savings, their career, and often their family and loved ones. The journey to safety can be long and full of dangers. During the journey, people can get hurt, and sadly, many lose their lives. All of this can cause severe trauma. Fortunately, there are international laws to protect refugees. Refugees cannot be sent back to their countries if it puts them at risk. Countries have a legal obligation to let refugees in and protect them. But even in a safe country, life as a refugee can be daunting. Refugees may continue to deal with trauma. Some are separated from their family and long to reunite with loved ones. There may be challenges related to adapting to a new environment. Host countries can provide assistance to learn the language and to adapt to cultural and other differences. But when does someone stop being a refugee? Some refugees can return home if the situation in their country becomes safe enough. Others will remain and integrate in their host countries. With the right support, refugees can successfully integrate and make a new life for themselves. Some refugees eventually even become citizens of their host country. Conflict or persecution force many people to leave their homes in search of safety. But fortunately, people affected by displacement have a right to seek asylum in another country. Asylum seekers are people who have requested protection from conflict or persecution, but their request has not been processed yet. People lodge an asylum application at a relevant authority of a host country, for example, a local asylum office. From this moment on, they are recognized as an asylum seeker. To prove that their request for protection is legitimate, asylum seekers go through a lengthy process. Trained officials will usually conduct a detailed interview with the asylum seeker. The interview helps them find out where the asylum seeker has come from and why they fled. Besides the interview, asylum seekers are usually asked to present identity documents and other materials supporting their application. That can be a passport, a birth certificate, or a marriage certificate. Next, the asylum authority will assess the credibility of the information provided by the asylum seeker. In particular, that means to find out the reasons why they fled and what risks they would face should they return. Processing an asylum application can take a long time. Whilst they wait, asylum seekers usually stay in the host country. In most cases, they have a right to the daily essentials: a place to sleep, meals, and healthcare. Despite this support, life as an asylum seeker can be full of challenges. Many asylum seekers stay in facilities with less privacy than in a private home. Whilst their asylum application is being verified, many of them live with unanswered questions and uncertainties on their status. During the procedure, they may not have permission to work and earn a living and to do other important things in life. Once the whole procedure is complete and every bit of information has been checked, the asylum authority will take a decision. If an asylum claim is rejected, asylum seekers are asked to return to their country and may get assistance to do so. Others try to appeal against the decision. If, however, the asylum claim is accepted, the asylum seeker will be granted protection. This means they gain refugee status or another protective status. Refugees should be granted a right to remain in their host country in safety and dignity. They should have rights to access education, work, healthcare, and other essential services.
Part 5, DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. This, people, is a special group of Americans, some that have attended Oak Ridge High School, others that have family members that have attended Oak Ridge High School. DACA is a special class, a special group of young American immigrants, people that have come from abroad that came as children with parents who came to the United States illegally. For whatever reason, they came illegally. They brought their children with them, and their children were minors. In 2012, Barack Obama, by executive order, provided DACA Dreamers, as they're called, a special route to citizenship. They were protected via executive action. People that today are the ages of 15 to 41. They were a little younger when Obama passed the executive action in 2012. But the idea was that these young people needed some kind of finality, some kind of something other than hiding in the shadows because their parents brought them across the border illegally. A lot of these people have been involved in schools, they've gone to college, they work. 800,000 of them live in limbo. And during the Trump administration, were squashed back into the shadows. Now, Joe Biden is president. Congress needs to act to come up with a route for these young individuals to live their life. Yeah, just to live their life. This video by Vox is a good news organization, lays out in 2017 the history of DACA recipients. In 2017, the Trump administration changed course and went to the Supreme Court to end the DACA program. The Supreme Court struck that move down. And so we're back to where we were. 15 to 41-year-olds living in limbo because their parents, when they were children, brought them over to this country illegally. What to do?
I remember the day that I found out I was undocumented. I got a call from an admissions office from a university that I had applied to. They wanted to see a green card. I was extremely embarrassed. My mother just started crying. In between her tears, she just started apologizing and told me that it was her fault and that she wanted a better future for us, and look at what happened.
That's Juan Escalante. When he was 11 years old, Juan and his family came to the United States from Venezuela, where life had become dangerous.
We were driving. And we stopped at a red light. I remember the day that I found out I was undocumented. I got a call from an admissions office from a university that I had applied to. They wanted to see a green card. I was extremely embarrassed. My mother just started crying. In between her tears, she just started apologizing and told me that it was her fault and that she wanted a better future for us, and look at what happened.
That's Juan Escalante. When he was 11 years old, Juan and his family came to the United States from Venezuela, where life had become dangerous.
We were driving, and we stopped at a red light, and a man approaches the car, and he tells my mother if she doesn't surrender the car to him, he is going to pull out a gun and kill one of her kids in the car right there. We picked up everything, we sold all our toys, and just embarked on this journey.
Juan made it to college and graduated, but because he was undocumented, he couldn't work, and he worried about being deported.
Even like a trip to the grocery store, and you get pulled over, and that's it, it's game over.
But that changed in June of 2012.
Effective immediately, the Department of Homeland Security is taking steps to lift the shadow of deportation from these young people.
If you come to the U.S. when you were under 16, if you were either in high school or had a high school diploma, and if you had either no criminal record or like a teeny tiny misdemeanor,
then you could apply for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. Basically, a permit that protects you from getting deported and allows you to work legally in the U.S. Juan got this protection, and so did nearly 800,000 others who applied. But now, that protection is gone.
I'm here today to announce that the program known as DACA that was effectuated under the Obama administration is being rescinded.
DACA was designed to protect a generation of young undocumented immigrants known as Dreamers, named after a bill called the DREAM Act, which had been floating around Congress for more than a decade, and with bipartisan support. The bill would have given unauthorized immigrants who grew up in the U.S. a way to gain legal status and eventually apply for citizenship. And even though it fell short of 60 Senate votes in 2010, the idea was still popular with the American public.
When President Obama announced DACA, it was in the middle of the 2012 presidential campaign, but it didn't turn into a huge campaign issue because Republicans were really ambivalent about turning immigration into a wedge issue.
We need to help accommodate these kids who, through no fault of their own, find themselves in this legal limbo.
We cannot forever have children who were brought here by their parents when they were small children to live in the shadows.
But in 2014, Obama proposed making older immigrants eligible for DACA and creating similar protections against deportation for undocumented parents with children who were U.S. citizens.
And a lot of Republicans said, whoa, that's too far.
These new actions would have protected about 4.5 million people, nearly half the estimated undocumented population. A group of 26 states sued the Obama administration over the expansion, and they won. A federal judge stopped the DACA expansions from going into effect, hinting that they were probably unconstitutional.
People had started thinking back to, well, if those bigger programs were unconstitutional, what does that say about this DACA program that's already in place?
Then came Donald Trump.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
Once Donald Trump became the leading Republican presidential candidate running on an immigration hardline platform, Republicans started to look at things in a new light.
If it weren't for me, you wouldn't even be talking about illegal immigration.
When Trump won, DACA's fate seemed sealed. But even though he revoked lots of Obama's other executive orders on immigration, nearly 8 months into his term, he still hadn't ended DACA.
A lot of the immigration hawks began to go, wait, we were promised that you were going to get rid of this amnesty that exists right now. What the heck happened?
So a bunch of states threatened to sue the government over DACA again if Trump didn't get rid of it, which brings us to early September 2017.
It is my duty to ensure that the laws of the United States are enforced and that the constitutional order is upheld.
It's a very stark message that leaves a whole lot of people who only consider themselves to be Americans in limbo for the next several months.
In the 5 years it's been around, DACA has had a big impact on young undocumented immigrants. A survey of DACA recipients found nearly 70% got a job with better pay. More than 60% opened their first bank account. Nearly 65% bought their first car, and a similar share say that they've pursued educational opportunities they previously couldn't. But when these protections expire over the coming weeks, months, or years, they'll be back where they started before 2012, unable to work legally and constantly at risk for deportation.
Everybody who is applying for naturalization at the very end takes their test, which consists of an English component, a bit of writing English, a bit of speaking English, and a bit of reading English, in addition to a civics component, 20 questions that you see right here. You're given a list of 100, and then you take a 20-question quiz that you have to score 12 on, and it doesn't matter with a short interview, whether you're Matt from UK, whether you're a DACA kid, a refugee, an asylum seeker, or Maha from Iraq. This is the final cherry on the sundae to become a U.S. citizen.
My family, all of them are waiting for me to be citizen. When I get citizenship, I feel I'll get my wings and flying over the ocean until I reach my family. I'm looking for a reunion with my family. Who does a U.S. senator represent? All people of the state. How many amendments does the Constitution have? 27. So my citizenship test, it will be on Thursday. Actually, I'm stressed. I feel stressed all the time. Sometimes I feel sick because of this feeling, you know. But I think everything will be okay. I'm going to the citizenship test. So I try to review all the questions, the 100 questions, one more million times. Oh, yes, so nice. That's it.
Did you pass?
Yes. I am American now. That's it. So now I'm going to call the another son who live in Dubai now. خلصت امتحان. Yes. Oh, so Alhamdulillah, thanks for God, I finished everything. I finished my citizen ceremony. Then I came here with my son to register for voting. So then I think I'm going to vote. These 6 years in my mind look like a film. The first time when I came to New York, how was my feeling? I was confusing, but now everything has become beautiful and the picture is so clear now.